readers, I'm Jessie Quinn from Cup of Books, and this is the book clock tag. This tag was created by Danika, and I was tagged by, well, Danika, and I am trying to be better about doing tags that people tag me in. How fast do you read? Moderately fast? In all seriousness, it really depends on what I'm reading. If I'm enjoying the book and it's pretty lightweight prose, then yes, I'm going to read it a lot quicker than if it's a book I'm not enjoying that's incredibly dense. How many books do you read a year? When I was in elementary school and middle school, I read all the time. When I was in high school, I still read a whole bunch, but I was reading primarily for class, and so that sort of affected how many books I read a year. When I was in college, I suffered a severe decline in reading, and that was part of the reason I started keeping track of how many books I read a year, and I started setting yearly challenges to get myself reading for pleasure again. And then last year was my first year out of school in a very long time, and I read 45 books. That's a lot for me. Keeping all of that in mind, my estimate is that I read on average about 20 to 30 books a year. How many books are on your TBR shelf or list? Far too many. Based on how many books you have to read and how many books it takes you to read in a year, how long is it going to take you to get through your TBR shelf? I'm just going to say that I'm never not going to have a TBR shelf. I'm always going to be accumulating new books, so I realize that even if I figured out how many books are on my shelves and how much time it would take me to read them and, you know, when I would finally finish that list, I know it's not actually ever going to be finished. I will never not have a TBR shelf. It's never gonna happen. Never, never, never. I'm going to be reading until I die. And when I die, I will still have books that I wasn't able to read that were sitting on my TBR shelf that hopefully will be given to someone who will read them. Yep, that's my answer. How many years have you been reading? Over 20, give or take a few years here and there. Based on how many books you read in a year and how many years you've been reading, how many books have you read in your lifetime? I feel like a good estimate would be somewhere between 500 and 1,000 books in my lifetime, and yes, that's a very broad estimate. How many hours a week do you spend reading? Now, this varies depending on my weekly schedule, but I would estimate that I probably read somewhere between 5 hours and 10 hours a week. Somewhere in there. When I'm reading a book, I take it everywhere with me. I read on my lunch breaks at work, I read in between meetings and appointments, I read while I'm cooking dinner, while I'm making lunch, I read while I'm waiting for my booktube videos to upload. Pretty much the only time I don't read is right before bed because I can never get to sleep on time when I do that. How many hours do you spend in book-related activities other than reading a week? Examples include booktubing, book blogging, book shopping, etc. I really enjoy watching booktube videos. I really enjoy browsing Book Depository and Amazon and Goodreads. And also, of course, I have the time I take to script, film, edit my booktube videos, which I think would count in this category. So I'm going to say 5 to 10. Would you like to change that ratio? For example, would you like to spend more time reading and less time on book-related activities? My ratio was pretty much even. Granted, that was partly because I was estimating, and yes, it does vary drastically from week to week, depending on how much time I have and also just how much energy I have. Sometimes reading books is not what I want to do. Sometimes looking at books is not what I want to do, and so I do other things. I have other interests. You never get to hear about them because this is a booktube channel, but I do have other interests. Anything else you'd like to add? You mean besides apologizing for the fact that I didn't want to do basic mathematics to answer these questions? Well, then not really. I'm pretty comfortable with my answers, and I think Danika's questions pretty much covered it. I'm going to tag these fantastic people, but if you are interested in doing this tag, I highly recommend you do it. And I also recommend checking out Danika's original tag video because, well, Danika actually did the research.